The morning my daughter-in-law told me to sleep on the couch in my own house, I didn't yell, I didn't slam a door. I just stood there in the hallway, holding a cup of coffee I'd made in my own kitchen, in the house I'd owned for 22 years, and I looked at her like she'd said something in a language I didn't speak. "We need the bedroom for my parents," she said. "They're going to be uncomfortable in the living room. You don't mind, do you, Dad?" She called me Dad. She always called me Dad when she wanted something. I minded. I minded more than I'd ever minded anything in my life. But I set my coffee down on the hallway table, the same table my wife Barbara had picked out at an antique market in Vermont the summer before she got sick, and I said I'd figure something out. That was my first mistake. Not the last. My name is Irving. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years working in commercial insurance, raised one son in a 4-bedroom colonial in Brecksville, Ohio, and I have never in my life asked anyone for anything I didn't earn first. That's not a boast. That's just how I was built. My son Nolan is 33. He's a good-looking kid, always was. Got his mother's eyes and her way of making you feel like everything was fine even when it wasn't. He married Sasha 6 years ago. I gave a toast at the wedding. I meant every word of it. What I didn't know then, and learned slowly and painfully over the years that followed, was that Sasha had a way of rearranging things. Quietly. Gradually. The way water shapes a stone. You don't notice until one day the stone looks completely different and you can't remember what it used to be. She started small. Moved furniture around when I visited. Changed the way my son spent holidays. Took small decisions out of his hands and replaced them with her preferences presented as facts. I told myself that was just marriage. That's how it goes. You adjust. Then Barbara died. My wife had ovarian cancer. She fought it for 2.5 years, and she fought it the way she did everything, with her chin up and her sense of humor intact. 3 weeks before she passed, she made me promise I'd keep the house. Said she wanted to picture me still sitting on the back porch in the evenings, the way we always did. I promised her. I meant it. After the funeral, Nolan sat down with me and said he was worried about me living alone. Said he and Sasha had talked it over, and they wanted to move in, share the space, help with the bills. I want to be honest here, I was lonely. The house felt enormous without Barbara in it. Every room had something in it that reminded me of her, and some days that was a comfort, and some days I couldn't breathe from it. So when Nolan suggested moving in, I said yes. That was 2 years ago. The first year wasn't bad. There was friction. There's always friction when adults share a house, but mostly it worked. Nolan and I watched football on Sundays. Sasha cooked sometimes and the food was good. I stayed out of their way. They stayed out of mine. We had a system. Then Sasha's parents needed a place to stay. She explained it one evening at dinner, casually, the way you mention you need to stop for gas. Her parents, Vic and June, had sold their condo down in Dayton because Vic had some health issues and they couldn't manage the upkeep. They needed somewhere temporary. Just a few months, she said. Just until they figured out next steps. I asked where they were planning to stay. She smiled. Here, of course, there's plenty of room. There wasn't plenty of room. There was 4 bedrooms. Nolan and Sasha had the master. I had my bedroom, Barbara's, and my bedroom, where we'd slept for 20 years, where I still kept her reading lamp on the nightstand because I couldn't bring myself to move it. The other 2 rooms were an office and a guest room. They can take the guest room and the office, Sasha said. We'll set up a little sitting area for my dad. He needs somewhere quiet to rest. I said I'd have to think about it. She nodded and said she understood, and I could see from her expression that she'd already made the decision and was just waiting for me to catch up. The 2nd June arrived on a Thursday. I remember the day because I'd been watching a game, and Sasha came in and turned off the television without asking, explaining that her father had a headache and the noise carried. They brought a lot of things with them, more than a few months' worth of things: furniture, a recliner, 3 large area rugs, a glass cabinet full of figurines that June arranged in the living room, rearranging my own pieces to the back of shelves or simply placing them in a box, which she left in the hallway with no explanation. In that box was a clock. It was a mantel clock that had belonged to my mother. Nothing expensive, nothing famous, but my mother had kept it on her bookshelf her entire adult life, and when she passed it came to me and I'd kept it on my mantel for 15 years. It was in a box in my own hallway. I took it back out and put it on the mantel. The next day it was in the box again. I didn't say anything. I'm not proud of that. But I was trying to be patient. I was trying to be the kind of man who doesn't make things worse. About 2 weeks after Vic and June moved in, Sasha came to find me in the kitchen in the morning. "Dad," she said, "I've been thinking. The master bedroom has its own bathroom, so Nolan and I are fine. But my parents are sharing the hallway bathroom with you, and it's getting a little crowded in the mornings." I waited. "We were thinking," she said, and she had that carefully arranged expression, the one that meant the thinking was already done and this was the announcement. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the living room. We can set up the pull-out sofa. It's a good mattress." I looked at her for a long moment. "This is my house, Sasha." She tilted her head like she didn't quite hear me correctly. "I know that, Dad. Of course. We're just talking about a temporary arrangement. A few more weeks, until my parents get settled. They've already taken 2 bedrooms. I know, and we're so grateful for your flexibility." She squeezed my arm. "You're so good to us." I did not sleep on the pull-out sofa. But I also didn't say what I should have said. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at Barbara's reading lamp, and I thought about what she would have told me to do. Barbara was not a passive woman. She would have had this conversation 6 different times before it ever got to this point. She would have been kind, and she would have been firm, and she would have been completely clear. I missed her in that moment more than I had in months. I called my old friend Douglas that evening. Douglas spent 25 years as a county magistrate before he retired, and he is the most unflappable human being I have ever known. I explained the situation. He was quiet for a moment. "Irving," he said, "you're describing a situation that has a legal dimension you may not be thinking about." I said, "What do you mean?" "Tenancy," he said. "How long have they been in the house?" I added it up. Nolan and Sasha had been there 2 years. Vic and June, going on 6 weeks. At certain thresholds, depending on Ohio statute, people residing in a property may acquire tenant rights. That doesn't mean they own anything, but it does mean you can't simply ask them to leave. You need to follow proper eviction procedure. I sat with that for a while. "What does proper eviction procedure look like?" I asked. He walked me through it. Written notice. Specific timeframes. If they refuse to vacate, a filing with the county court, a hearing, a judge. It could take weeks, possibly longer. "The important thing," Douglas said, "is that you document everything. You communicate in writing, and you do everything by the book. Because if you do anything informal or reactive, it can complicate the process." I thanked him and I sat in the kitchen for another hour after I hung up. Then I got up and I made a list. The next morning, I went to the Kinko's on Route A2 and I printed 2 separate documents. One was a formal notice to Vic and June, informing them that their residence in my home was a temporary arrangement, that I was terminating effective 30 days from the date of the letter, and that they would need to make other arrangements. The other was a letter to Nolan and Sasha, my son and his wife, informing them that I was also initiating a formal change to our living arrangement and that we needed to discuss terms in writing going forward. I certified both letters at the post office. I also sent a copy of each by regular first-class mail. Douglas had told me that if someone refuses to sign for a certified letter, a regular mail copy is assumed by the court to have been delivered. I slid a copy under each bedroom door as well, just so there was no question about delivery. Sasha found me in the kitchen within the hour. She was holding the letter. Her face was a color I hadn't seen on it before. "What is this?" she said. "It's a formal notice," I said. "I think the language is pretty clear. You're kicking my parents out. I'm terminating a temporary arrangement. They've been here 6 weeks. This isn't a permanent situation. They have nowhere to go, Dad. Their condo is gone. My father is sick." "I understand that," I said, "and I'm giving them 30 days, which is more than the statute requires for a licensee. That's enough time to find somewhere suitable." She stared at me. "I can't believe you're doing this. After everything, after we moved in to help you, after everything we've given up." I thought about that. I thought about what they'd given up. Nolan had been paying rent in an apartment in Lakewood. He'd given up that rent. He'd given up nothing else that I could see. He drove a truck I'd put $22,000 toward. He lived in a house that cost him nothing. He ate meals in a kitchen I paid for. "Sasha," I said, "I want us to handle this respectfully. But this is my house, and I am telling you clearly that the arrangement with your parents needs to end." She left the room. A few minutes later, I heard her on the phone with Nolan, who was at work. Nolan came home early that day. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, and he had his mother's eyes, and he looked genuinely upset, which hurt me in a way I hadn't expected. "Dad," he said, "can we talk about this?" "We can talk," I said. "Vic is on 3 medications. They don't have a place to go. Can we wait until they have a plan?" "They've had 6 weeks to make a plan," I said. "I'm giving them 30 more days. That's 5.5 weeks combined." "Dad, this isn't." He stopped. He rubbed the back of his neck. "This isn't what we expected. Nolan, look at me." He looked at me. "I love you. I want you here. But I have to be honest with you about something, and I need you to hear it." I paused. "There is a mantel clock in a cardboard box in my hallway. Your wife's mother put it there because she wanted to display her own things. That clock belonged to your grandmother. I have put it back on the mantel twice. It has been put back in the box twice." He opened his mouth and closed it. "I have not said a word about it," I said. "I have not made it a fight. I have tried to be accommodating, but there is a point at which accommodating other people becomes allowing them to take over, and I think we passed that point some time ago. Your wife asked me to sleep on the pull-out sofa in my own living room so her parents could have my bedroom. I didn't do it, but I want you to think about the fact that it was asked." The kitchen was very quiet. "Did she actually ask that?" he said. "She did." He was quiet a long time. "I didn't know about that." "I know." He looked out the window at the backyard. The bird feeder I'd hung was still out there. Barbara had put it up the spring before she got sick. "What do you need?" he finally said. "I need your in-laws to find another place to live. And I need you and me to sit down and establish some ground rules for how this house works, in writing, so we're not having this conversation again." He nodded slowly. He didn't argue. That surprised me more than anything that had happened in the previous weeks. Sasha, however, was not finished. That evening, she came to me again. This time, she had Vic with her. He was a heavy-set man, late 60s, with the kind of expression that was used to being listened to. He stood in my kitchen and told me that what I was doing was cruel, that I was punishing sick people, that I should be ashamed. I let him finish. Then I said, "Mr. Vic, with respect, you moved into my home at your daughter's invitation without asking me directly. You've been here 6 weeks. I'm giving you 30 days to make arrangements. I don't think that's cruel. I think that's more than fair. He said something about family and about the right thing to do. I said, I'd like you to take this conversation to your daughter and your son-in-law. I've said what I need to say. He left. Sasha followed him. She paused at the door. You're going to regret this, she said. I hope not, I said. What I didn't tell her, what I hadn't told anyone yet, was that 2 days earlier I'd noticed something. I'd gone into the office room, the one Vic was using as a sitting room, to retrieve a file from the cabinet in the corner, and I noticed the bookshelf on the far wall. Barbara's bookshelf. It had been there since we moved in. It was a solid cherry wood piece, wide and heavy, 7 feet tall. She'd bought it from an estate sale in Chagrin Falls, and she'd loved it. It wasn't there. I mean, it was there, in the sense that it was still in the house, but it had been moved. Disassembled, actually. The shelves were stacked against the wall in the hallway closet. Vic's recliner sat where the bookshelf had been, and the books, Barbara's books, her paperback mysteries and her collected poetry and the set of encyclopedias she'd insisted on keeping even when Nolan said they were useless in the internet age, were in 3 plastic bins in the garage. Her books were in bins in the garage. I stood in the garage for a while. I found the bin that had her poetry collection in it. I pulled out the copy of Mary Oliver she'd kept on her nightstand in the hospital, the one with the pages folded down at corners, her handwriting in the margins. I brought it inside. I put it on my nightstand. Then I called Darius back. I told him about the bookshelf, about the books, about the clock and the box. I asked him whether the movement or storage of my personal property by a resident without permission constituted damage or loss that could be claimed. He said it might. He recommended I have everything documented and photographed. He gave me the name of a woman, a property assessor he trusted, who could come and do a formal evaluation of the condition and contents of the home. I hired her. She came the following week and spent 3 hours going through every room. She was thorough and professional, and she asked almost no questions. Her written report noted the missing clock from its established location, the disassembly and storage of the cherry bookshelf, a scratch along the baseboard in the hallway consistent with moving large furniture, and 2 chips in the wall paint in the office room, consistent with the same. The report also included an estimate of the cost to restore the bookshelf to its assembled condition and the cost to address the wall damage. It came to $410. That number was not the point. The number was not why I did it. I had that assessment done because I needed a record, because Douglas had told me that courts respond to documentation the way other people respond to tone of voice. You can say anything you want, but what's written down is what matters. Vic and June did not leave at the end of the 30 days. I wasn't surprised. I filed with the county. It took 11 days to get a hearing date. In the meantime, I had a conversation with Nolan. A real conversation, the kind we hadn't had in longer than I wanted to admit. And I showed him the assessment report and the photographs. He was quiet for a long time, looking at the photo of Barbara's books in the plastic bins. I didn't know they did that, he said. I know you didn't. She shouldn't have let them do that. He meant Sasha. No, I said, she shouldn't have. The hearing was on a Tuesday morning. Bitch did not appear. June appeared with their daughter, who spoke on their behalf. She told the judge they had nowhere to go, that Vic was unwell, that I was acting out of spite. The judge looked at the certified letter documentation. She looked at the date of the original arrival versus the date of the notice. She looked at the assessment report. She ruled in my favor. Vic and June had 14 days to vacate. Sasha didn't speak to me for 5 days after the hearing. Then one evening she came into the kitchen while I was making dinner, and she sat down at the table and she looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. My parents found an apartment, she said, near my aunt in Strongsville, ground floor, accessible. They can move in on the 15th. I'm glad, I said. I meant it. I want you to know she said, and she stopped and started again. I want you to know that I didn't tell Nolan about the sofa. I should have. I was trying to manage everything at once, and I made some calls I shouldn't have made. I turned the burner down. Sasha, I said. I accept that. She nodded. Looked at the table. The bookshelf, she said. My mother wanted more space for the recliner. I should have said no. Yes, I said. You should have. Is there going to be anything else? Legally? I thought about it. No, I said. I'm not interested in a fight. I'm interested in my house being my house. She looked up at me. Okay, I said. Nolan helped his in-laws move out on the 15th. He carried boxes. He drove a rented truck. I stayed out of the way mostly. Before Vic left, he came and stood in the front doorway and looked at me, and he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, I hope you're satisfied. I said, I hope your health improves, Vic. He didn't respond to that. He walked to the truck and got in. After they left, I went into the office room. Nolan and I reassembled the bookshelf that afternoon. It took about 2 hours. He handed me shelves, and I set them in place, and we didn't talk much. But the silence was comfortable, the way silence between people can be when they understand each other. When it was back together, I brought Barbara's books in from the garage. I didn't rush it. I put them back the way she'd had them. Not exactly, because I couldn't remember exactly, but close enough. Poetry on the left, mysteries in the middle, the encyclopedias on the bottom shelf where they'd always been. I put the Mary Oliver where it could be seen. I found the mantel clock in a box in the hallway. It was still there. Nobody had moved it since I'd stopped bothering to put it back. I set it on the mantel. I wound it. It still kept good time. Nolan and Sasha are still here. We have a written agreement now, 2 pages, nothing complicated. Just a clear statement of how the house works and what belongs to whom and what decisions require my input. Nolan's lawyer drafted it. Mine reviewed it. We both signed it. There are still hard days. Some mornings I come downstairs and the kitchen has been rearranged, and I have to remind myself that it's a small thing, that the large things are settled. There are still moments when I miss Barbara so much it stops me mid-step in a hallway. But the clock is on the mantel. Her books are on the shelf. Her lamp is still on the nightstand. And I sleep in my own bed, in my own room, in my own house. That was never negotiable. I just took too long to say so out loud. The thing I keep coming back to is the clock, not the court hearing, not the certified letters. Not even the moment Sasha's father stood in my kitchen and told me I should be ashamed of myself. What I keep coming back to is a small brass mantel clock sitting in a cardboard box in my own hallway, and the fact that I walked past it twice without saying a word. I think that's where it actually started. Not when Vic and June moved in, not when Sasha asked me to give up my bedroom, but in that moment of silence when I chose not to say anything. Because the truth is, the people in your life will generally take as much space as you allow them to take. That's not a judgment. That's just how it works. And I had spent a long time allowing. I allowed it because I was grieving. I allowed it because I loved my son and didn't want to make things hard for him. I allowed it because somewhere in the back of my mind I think I felt like a man living alone in the 4-bedroom house didn't have the right to take up all of it. But that's not generosity. That's something else. That's what happens when you confuse keeping the peace with losing yourself. What I learned, slowly, and only because I had a friend patient enough to walk me through it, is that doing the right thing and doing the easy thing are rarely the same. Douglas didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. He told me what the situation actually required, which was harder and more formal and more uncomfortable than anything I'd imagined. And I had to decide whether I was willing to do it anyway. That took more out of me than I expected. Not the paperwork. The paperwork was straightforward. What took something out of me was sitting across from my son at the kitchen table and showing him photographs of his mother's books in plastic bins in the garage. That required me to be honest in a way that felt like risk. I didn't know how he'd respond. I didn't know if it would cost me the relationship. I did it anyway, because the alternative was continuing to live in a version of my own life that I didn't recognize. I think about Nolan a lot, about what it must have been like to sit there and look at those photos and understand that things had gone further than he knew. He could have gotten defensive. He could have taken his wife's side and made it a war. He didn't. He got quiet, and he said I didn't know they did that. And something in that quietness told me there was still something solid between us worth protecting. That's the part that required the most from both of us. Not the legal process, but the willingness to stay honest with each other through something that could have broken the whole thing apart. There's a kind of strength in that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up when it's needed, in the middle of a hard conversation at a kitchen table. The bookshelf is back together. The clock is on the mantel. And I still walk past the hallway sometimes and remember the box. And I think, never again. Not out of bitterness, just out of the knowledge that the things worth having, your home, your dignity, your relationships, require you to be clear about what they mean to you before someone else decides for you. Barbara would have said I took too long. She'd have been right. But I got there.